Hey everyone, ready to explore some really cool language learning tricks?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Today we're tackling something that can be kind of a hurdle for a lot of people learning a language.
Yeah.
Specifically, how to actually think in English.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's one thing to know the words, but it's a whole other ball game to have them come out naturally without having to, translate in your head.
It's such a different level.
Totally. And for this deep dive, we're going to be looking at some advice from Daniel and Jennifer
Yeah.
from the English La podcast.
I love them.
Me too. They've got some really great methods for making that shift from translating to thinking, and they actually share a lot of their own experiences.
Which I find is so helpful.
Totally. It makes it way more relatable.
Mm-hmm.
So their first tip is so simple you might not even think it would work.
Interesting.
But it's all about labeling the objects around your house with sticky notes.
Oh, wow.
I know. I can just imagine it getting a little out of control.
Yeah, like sticky notes everywhere.
Right. Like my coffee mug would have coffee mug.
Yeah.
My refrigerator would have refrigerator.
I love that.
But what's the learning strategy behind it?
So it's really about passive learning.
Yeah.
You know, if you think back to how you learned your first language,
Right?
you didn't start with flashcards.
No.
It was just constant exposure.
Yeah.
So when you see that sticky note that says refrigerator on that big metal box every single day, your brain just naturally starts to make that connection without you even really trying.
I see. So it's like you're kind of tricking your brain into learning.
Yeah, a little bit.
But I'm wondering, doesn't our brain already have a word for that object
Oh, of course.
in our native language?
Yeah.
So how do we get it to make that switch and start thinking of the English word instead of just defaulting to our native language word?
Well, that's actually the genius of this technique.
Okay.
By pairing the English word with the object so consistently, you're basically creating a shortcut in your brain. So you kind of bypass that need to translate because you're building that direct link between the object and its English name.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's like you're retraining your brain's autopilot.
Yes.
Instead of having to go through the translation station in your head, you're like building a new express route.
That's a great way to put it.
Straight to the English word, which I could see how that would really speed things up.
Absolutely. And Daniel actually talks about this in the podcast.
Oh, cool.
He said that it really did help him stop mentally translating everything. It was like his brain finally started thinking in English even when he wasn't actively studying.
That's so encouraging.
I know. It's like a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And, you know, I bet it also makes conversations feel a lot smoother, too,
Yeah,
when you're not constantly stopping to translate in your head.
absolutely.
So then the second technique they talk about is simple sentence thinking.
Okay.
It's kind of like starting small and building up your mental English muscles slowly.
So kind of like starting with a lightweight
Yeah.
before you go for the bench press.
Exactly.
What kind of sentences are we talking here?
Really basic everyday phrases.
Okay.
Things like, I'm tired, or it's a beautiful day, or I need coffee.
That's a good one.
Right. And actually, Jennifer gives a great example in one of the episodes.
Oh, tell me.
She would wait for the bus,
Okay.
and she would just think things like, the bus is late, or I wonder where the bus is.
I see.
Yeah,
Okay, but that sounds almost too simple.
I know.
Does it really make a difference just thinking those short phrases?
It's all about repetition.
Oh, okay.
You know, remember, you're training your brain
Okay.
to think in English, and that just takes time and practice.
That makes sense.
Think of it like building a muscle.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't expect to just bench press 200 pounds after one workout.
No.
It's the same with language.
Yeah.
By consistently thinking, even if it's just simple sentences, and even for like really basic everyday stuff,
Yeah.
you're laying the foundation for more complex thought patterns later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see. So it's kind of like building those neural pathways.
Exactly.
The more you use them, the stronger they get.
Yeah.
Okay, I can definitely get on board with that.
Great.
But I have to admit, the next technique they talk about, I'm a little hesitant about.
Oh, really? Which one?
Um,
Huh?
Self-talk.
Oh.
Talking to yourself in English even when you're alone,
Yeah.
I can't help but think I'd get some weird looks
You might.
if anybody caught me. But why is that helpful?
So if you remember, we were talking about how children learn languages.
Right.
It's that immersion, right?
Yeah.
So self-talk is basically a way to create that immersive environment even when you're not around English speakers. Yeah.
Okay, and so it's not just like random rambling.
No, not
There's a real method to it.
Yes,
You're actually
yeah.
like practicing.
Yeah.
Sentence construction, vocabulary.
It's all happening in real time.
I see. And you're actually saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Which I guess that would be helpful for pronunciation.
Absolutely.
Like it's almost like a secret weapon
I think so.
for improving your speaking skills without having to worry about an audience.
Yeah. Daniel actually talks about this in one of the episodes.
Oh, really?
He would cook dinner,
Okay.
and he would narrate the whole process to himself in English.
Like what would he say?
He'd be like, I'm chopping the vegetables. Now I'm adding the spices. That kind of thing.
Okay, so even if it feels silly, there's a purpose.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So wait, you're saying that could help with my accent?
Oh, yeah.
I've been trying to get some of those sounds right.
Yeah,
And it just feels awkward practicing with other people.
totally. So think of self-talk as your own personal pronunciation coach.
Okay.
You can experiment with different sounds,
Right.
try out new words. You can even record yourself to hear
Oh,
how you're doing and track your progress.
that's a great idea.
And the best part is you can do it whenever, wherever.
Yeah, nobody's judging you.
Nobody would
Yeah.
lie.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
But I'm curious, are there benefits beyond just pronunciation?
totally.
Yeah.
So Jennifer actually highlights this in one of the episodes.
Oh, cool.
It's the confidence boost.
Hmm.
When you get used to hearing yourself speak English, even if it's just to yourself,
Okay.
it becomes less scary to actually use it in real conversations.
I can see that.
Yeah,
It's like you're breaking down that mental barrier of like fear and hesitation.
exactly. Like a dress rehearsal
Right.
for real life conversations.
I see that would be helpful, especially for people who are shy.
Totally.
Sure.
Or nervous about speaking in public.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, isn't there a risk of reinforcing bad habits if you're practicing alone?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
What if your grammar's off or your pronunciation isn't quite right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's where being mindful and getting feedback comes in. So self-talk is a great tool,
Mm-hmm.
but it shouldn't be your only way to practice.
Right.
So it's really important to supplement it with other forms of learning,
Like what?
like taking classes or talking to native speakers,
Okay.
or maybe using some language learning apps that can actually give you feedback on your pronunciation.
Oh, that's helpful.
Right. So it's not like a magic bullet.
Right.
It's just one tool.
It's about finding what works for you
Exactly.
and kind of creating a personalized approach.
Absolutely. And you know what I think is so interesting about all three of these techniques?
Yeah.
The labeling,
Mm-hmm.
the simple sentence thinking,
Right.
and the self-talk.
Yeah.
It's how they really help you shift your mindset.
Okay.
So it's not just about learning vocabulary or grammar rules.
Mm-hmm.
It's about integrating English into your daily life
Right.
in a much deeper way.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's kind of like recreating that immersive environment
Exactly.
that we had as kids when we were learning our first language.
Yeah. But this time we're creating the immersion ourselves in our own minds
Exactly.
instead of having it be all around us.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
That's actually really insightful.
Yeah. Almost like mindfulness,
Oh, that's a great connection.
but for language learning.
I love that.
Yeah. Instead of just kind of going through the motions of your day, you're actively engaging with English,
Yeah.
even during the most mundane tasks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's key. And that actually brings us to a really important point that Daniel and Jennifer both emphasize in the podcast.
Oh, what's that?
It's not about perfection.
Okay.
It's about progress.
Oh, I like that.
Don't get hung up on making mistakes
Right?
or feeling self-conscious.
Yeah.
It's more about embracing the journey
Yeah.
and celebrating those small wins.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's okay to stumble a bit
Yes.
as long as you're practicing
Exactly.
and
But
pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
absolutely. You know, every native speaker was once a beginner.
They had to go through their own awkward phases
True.
and make tons of mistakes.
Yeah.
The key is to just not let those setbacks discourage you.
Yeah.
View them as opportunities
Hmm.
to learn and grow.
Right. Okay, so where does all this leave us? We've talked about 3 different techniques from English the podcast:
Yeah.
labeling, simple sentence thinking, and self-talk.
Those are great ones.
They all seem pretty accessible, even for someone like me who tends to overthink things.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the most important takeaway for our listeners?
That's a great question. I think if I had to sum it all up, it's that thinking in English isn't some magical ability that only some people have.
Right.
It's a habit
Okay.
that you can build through consistent effort
Right.
and the right techniques.
Okay, so choose the approach that speaks to you.
Yeah, experiment. Be patient with yourself.
And don't be afraid to have fun with it.
I love that.
Yeah, whether you're covering your house in sticky notes or like narrating your breakfast.
That sounds fun.
Right. Find ways to make it enjoyable.
Absolutely.
Because the more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to actually stick with it.
I completely agree.
Ah.
And as you kind of embark on this journey of thinking in English,
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about how you can weave these techniques into your daily life
Mm-hmm.
in a way that feels natural
Okay.
and sustainable
Right.
for you.
Yeah.
So maybe it's fitting them into your routines
Right.
or setting aside some time each day to practice.
Yeah.
I think the key is making it a part of your lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
not just another chore.
Right. Not just another thing on your to-do list.
Exactly. So there you have it. 3 techniques
Yeah.
backed by real experience and learning science
Awesome.
to help you unlock that power of thinking in English.
I love it. I hope this deep dive has given everyone the knowledge and the inspiration they need
Me too.
to take their language skills to the next level.
Absolutely.
Happy practicing, everybody.
Yeah, have fun.
So it's like you're kind of creating that immersion yourself
Yeah.
in your own head.
Exactly. It's like a little English world
Yeah.
up here.
Right.
Yeah, and it's almost like a form of mindfulness.
Oh, yeah.
But for language learning,
I like that.
instead of just going through your day,
Right.
you're actively thinking about English and using it.
Yeah. Even for just regular everyday things.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, that actually brings us to something really important
Okay.
that both Daniel and Jennifer talk about a lot.
What's that?
Don't worry about being perfect.
Oh, okay.
It's more about making progress.
Okay.
So don't get hung up on making mistakes
Right.
or feeling embarrassed.
Yeah.
Just enjoy and make tons of mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the key is to just not let those mistakes get you down.
Yeah.
See them as chances to learn
Yeah.
and get better.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so where does that leave us? We've talked about 3 techniques
Mm-hmm.
from English the podcast, labeling things,
Yeah.
thinking in simple sentences,
Mm-hmm.
and talking to yourself in English.
It's a good combo.
It is a good combo, and
Yeah.
they seem pretty easy to do,
I think so.
even for someone like me who sometimes overthinks things.
I get it.
So what would you say is the main takeaway for our listeners?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing to remember is that thinking in English isn't some special talent.
Okay.
It's not something you're born with or without.
Yeah, it's not magical.
It's a habit.
Okay.
And you can develop that habit with practice
Right.
and by using the right techniques.
So just choose the approach that you like.
Yeah.
And try it out.
Exactly. Experiment
Yeah.
and be patient.
Don't give up.
Yeah. And have fun with it.
Yes. I think that's so important.
I agree.
Because if you're not enjoying it,
Right.
you're not going to keep doing it.
Exactly. And, as you start trying to think in English more and more,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting to think about how you can make it a part of your everyday life
Okay.
in a way that feels natural
Right.
and something that you can actually stick with,
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that means finding ways to fit it into your routines
Mm-hmm.
or setting aside some time each day to practice.
Yeah.
I think the important thing is making it a part of your life
Yeah.
and not just another thing on your to-do list.
Right. Not just a chore.
Exactly.
It should be something you enjoy.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like we're building our own little English worlds in our minds.
Exactly.
So cool.
Yeah. And it's like you said before, it's kind of like mindfulness,
Right.
but for language.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. It's about being present
Mm-hmm. And really engaging with the language.
instead of just going through the motions. Like
Yeah.
you're really tuning in.
Yeah. And that actually reminds me of another really important point
Okay.
that Daniel and Jennifer emphasize a lot.
Yeah. What's that?
Don't get too caught up in trying to be perfect.
Okay.
It's more about progress.
Right.
Don't worry so much about making mistakes.
I think we all do that.
We do. It's natural.
Yeah.
But try not to let it hold you back.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to experiment.
Yeah.
Just have fun with it.
I like that. So it's okay to stumble a bit
Totally.
as long as you keep practicing.
Exactly. And remember, everyone who speaks English fluently was a beginner once.
That's true.
They all had to go through their own awkward phases
Yeah,
and make tons of mistakes.
definitely.
So try to see those mistakes as opportunities
Okay.
to learn and grow.
Not as failures.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so we've covered 3 techniques from English La Podcast today.
Yeah.
Labeling things around the house with sticky notes,
Mm-hmm.
thinking in simple sentences,
Yeah.
and talking to yourself in English.
They're good ones.
I like them a lot. They all seem pretty doable,
I think so too.
even for someone who overthinks things like me.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so great about them.
Yeah.
They're really accessible.
So as we wrap up, What would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
Hmm, that's a great question. I think the key takeaway is that thinking in English isn't some magical skill
Right.
that some people have and others don't.
It's not like a superpower.
Exactly. It's a habit.
Okay.
And like any habit, you can develop it with practice.
And the right tools.
Exactly. So find the techniques that work best for you.
Yeah, experiment a little.
And most importantly, be patient with yourself.
Yeah, it's a journey.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's important to enjoy the process.
Absolutely. So whether you're covering your house in sticky notes or narrating your day,
I love that image.
right, find ways to make it fun.
Absolutely. Because the more you enjoy it, the more likely you are to stick with it.
Exactly. Well, I think that about wraps it up for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've learned some fantastic techniques for thinking in English.
Bombs and pros.
Exactly. From Daniel and Jennifer.
Thanks to them.
Yes, thank you to them, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Yeah, we hope you found this helpful.
And we hope you feel inspired to go out there.
And start thinking in English.
Absolutely. Happy practicing, everyone.